Alright guys, so I wanted to go over the phases of the moon with you. So the phases of the moon are actually something you guys can look up at and see in the night sky. And sometimes not only in the night sky, as we'll learn in a minute. So the moon, you guys, and this is it goes in orbit around the Earth. It is always somewhere around our Earth, moving around just the same way that the Earth orbits the sun. So while the Earth is orbiting the sun, the moon is orbiting the Earth. And as that position of the moon changes between the Earth and the sun, what part of the moon we can see also changes. I sent home a really cool experiment with that for you guys with a flashlight and an orange that you guys can look at that was sent home as along with your water cycle experiment. So we're going to look at each stage of this and see how it comes along. This shape here, you guys, and page shows you where the moon is relative to the sunlight and the Earth in each stage of the process as we go through. So, you guys have a couple different cards in your set. You have your control and your definitions, and these guys. So, we're going to take the definitions off, because I'll put those out as we go. And then I'm going to flip your control over, because we're not going to need that quite yet. Paper clip there. And I'm going to put out my cards here. Just putting them out in an order. Doesn't really matter which order at this point, because we're going to learn what order they go in a moment. And then I'm going to line my labels up here so that I can see them to put out with you guys. So, the moon has different phases and different names for each one of those phases. Some of them you guys are probably a little bit familiar with, and some of them you might not have heard before. So we start out, you guys, with a new moon. A new moon is seen when the moon is between the Earth and the sun. So you can see on our phrase here, moon, sun, and the Earth. So the moon is in the middle. So we can't see the side that is lit up, so the side facing us is dark or very faint. The new moon rises and sets with the sun, so they're in the sky at the same time. And so the new moon, you guys, is this guy right here for new moon. As you guys can see on it, there is not a lot that we can see here for our lit up side of the moon. It's pretty dark. Next, you guys, for our phases of the moon, we're going to have waxing crescent. So the waxing crescent phase, this little bit of light that's right here, starts to grow and grow larger each day until almost half of the visible side of the moon is lit. Not quite half though, but almost. So, waxing crescent, you guys, we have this one. You can see here where this part is getting bigger. So that's going to be our waxing crescent. And then after our waxing crescent, you guys, we have first quarter moon, which is where that half of the moon is lit. At that point, the moon is about a quarter of the way through its orbit around the Earth. So if we go back and look here, we had new moon, waxing crescent. First quarter is about half the way, or a fourth of the way around our moon, or around our Earth. So it rises at about noon, and it actually is high overhead at around 6 p.m. for our first quarter moon. So it's not a moon that you're going to typically see out past dark unless it's the winter and fall half of the year, where 6 p.m. is when it is dark outside. So first quarter moon, that first half of the moon is lit. First quarter moon. Which sounds silly that the first quarter moon has half of the moon lit, but it's a quarter of the way through the whole cycle, not just that half being lit. And then you guys, we have the waxing gibbous. So that word waxing, you guys remember, means increasing. So that bit of area of light is increasing. So with the waxing gibbous, the lit part of the moon grows from being half to a full moon slowly over the course of several days. So the moon starts to rise later and later in the afternoon until it's up into the evening, all evening. So the waxing gibbous, you guys, is when more than half of the moon is available to see, and that is this guy right here. So we went from about half to over halfway, but not quite a full moon yet. Full moon is next, and that, you guys, is the time when the moon rises as the sun sets, so the moon actually shines all through the night, which is not the case with the other phases. So the entire side of the moon that faces the earth is lit up, because we can see for the full moon that on the opposite side of the earth here, it's not being blocked by anything. The sun is hitting this and the earth is reflecting that light back, so that we can see it. So the moon and the sun are opposite sides of the earth for that one, and the moon rises as the sun sets, and we have our full moon where we can see the entire side of the moon that faces us. There's only one side of the moon that faces us. We never on earth will be able to see the other side of the moon unless we are looking at a picture of it. We just can't see it. It's how it works with its orbit and how it turns. After our full moon, we have our waning gibbous. So the waning gibbous follows the full moon, and that one side of the moon that was light starts to slowly return back to being dark. And that lit portion of the moon that we can see is called waning, and waning also means decreasing. So the waning gibbous, you guys, is where that really bright part of the moon starts to decrease. And we can see here we had our full moon, but it's starting to get a little bit dark again. So that is our waning gibbous. And then just like we had a first quarter, we have a last quarter. The last quarter is similar to the first quarter because half of the near side of the moon is lit. This time, though, it's the opposite half. So, got my last quarter and my first quarter. If I hold them up, you can see, help if I hold them the right way. You can see that they are opposite sides. And if I put them together, I had two halves that would make about a full moon. But it is opposite halves. And the last quarter moon rises around midnight. Actually doesn't set until around noon. So when you guys see that part of the moon in the night sky, it's often that part of the waxing gibbous, or not the waxing gibbous, of the waning gibbous, sorry, and the last quarter that is setting still that we can see at the same time in the morning. And then we have finally our waning crescent just before we get back to our new moon. So that little bit there gets smaller and smaller and smaller until we get here to our waning crescent. And then it gets smaller and smaller until we get to our new moon. Sorry, new moon. So I'm going to go through and double check these guys. And as I do, I'm going to actually build and put them in order for you guys. So first one I have here is full moon. Full moon up at the top here. The top kind of our cycle where we see the moon the most. And then we have our waxing gibbous. Our waxing gibbous, you guys, was that phase of the full moon just before our full moon, because that waxing means that it's increasing and it's moving towards the full moon. And I did get that guy correct for waxing gibbous. Waxing gibbous definition, that guy. Boom. Put these guys off to the side so I have room to make it. So I want to put it right here, just about. And then we have our first quarter. First quarter, you guys, was this guy, which mine's backwards. That's the downside of putting it down. If you're doing your cards and that's the case, just flip it around. So first quarter I got right. First quarter is that still part where the moon is growing, and it's a quarter of the way through the cycle. So first quarter, you guys, I have my full moon, I have my waxing gibbous, I have my first quarter. So next, you guys, we have waxing crescent, which is over here. Waxing crescent. I got those guys right. Waxing crescent is that stage just after the full moon where our moon is still kind of growing. Or after our new moon, sorry, where our moon's still kind of growing. And then I know that after that, I have the new moon, which I got correct. And I'm actually kind of going a little bit in backwards order, so I apologize for that. New moon, and then I have waning crescent, which is where that's decreasing and going back to our moon. I'm going to put these guys in the right order so that I've got room over here for the rest. So new moon and waxing crescent, that's growing. First quarter, waxing gibbous growing more until we get to our full moon. And then I'm actually going to go waning gibbous will be after our full it's starting to get smaller. Waning gibbous. And then after waning gibbous, we have last quarter, where about that half of the moon is lit up there. Got that guy right. Last quarter. And then last but not least, we have waning crescent, which I got correct for waning crescent. So our moon starts off, I mean, really, you can start anywhere in the cycle, but it's always going to go in the same order. New moon, waxing crescent. First quarter, waxing gibbous. Full moon, waning gibbous. Last quarter, waning crescent. The light grows, and then the moon gets darker. For that. So, we do have a couple questions, or not questions, other cards that I wanted to share with you. So earlier I mentioned the far side of the moon. So the far side of the moon always faces away from the Earth. We can't see it. Although it's sometimes called the dark side of the moon, it's actually just as lit up as often as the near side of the moon. So it's about as lit. Only astronauts have seen the far side of the moon because they can take that picture. So that, you guys, is a picture of the far side of the moon that you can see in your card. And as for those craters on the moon that we can see, all those dark patches, the moon is covered with impact craters that formed when comets and meteorites crash onto its surface. The lack of atmosphere means that, unlike here on Earth, where most of those things burn up before they crash to the surface, they don't do that. They just crash and leave really big impact holes. And ancient astronomers, you guys, actually thought that those dark areas were filled with water and were called seas, which we now know is not actually the truth. But that would have been really cool. As for moon exploration, you guys, humans have dreamed of visiting the moon for a long, long time. Everyone who ever looked at it, for the most part, up at it was like, man, I would really want to go see what that is like up there. So in the 1950s, they actually sent some unmanned probes that landed on the moon a couple times. And then on July 20th of 1969, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, who is in my picture here, were the first humans to set foot on the moon. And that was the end of the space race. And we've sent people back up into space since to look at things, but those were the first people that we had sent to the moon. So, as for moonrise and earthshine. So those sound kind of funny. Moonrise, earthshine. Usually we hear a lot about sunrise or sunshine, but the moon also rises as it orbits around the Earth, and the Earth reflects the sun's light back onto the moon, which is what we can see when the moon is a thin crescent. The darker part is actually lit up by the Earth. So you can actually see that in the picture there. Then, you guys, we have the harvest moon. So the harvest moon is the moon that's closest to the autumn equinox that we talked about a few weeks ago. At this time of year, the moon rises earlier than usual, which is what helps farmers to be able to harvest their crops even after the sun goes down. The harvest moon appears bigger than usual, but it's not actually any bigger than your usual moon. The moon has not grown in size. It's just the perspective that we can see it from because of the time of year. But that's the harvest moon. And then we get to the topic of eclipses. So, a solar eclipse, you guys, is when the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon are in a line, and the Moon is in the middle. So kind of like we have with our new moon here. Sun, Earth, Moon in the middle. The Moon covers up the view, Earth's view of the Sun, because if you're standing here, you can't see the Sun because this is blocking it. But, so for a few minutes, the Sun seems to disappear, and the sky can appear dark in the middle of the day. Not like that. Lunar eclipses, you guys, occur when the moon passes through the Earth's shadow. So this also happens when the Sun, Earth, and Moon are in a line, but the Earth is in the middle. So Sun, Earth, Moon, Earth in the middle. It can last for a few hours and can be viewed from the night side of the Earth. So it has to be nighttime to be able to view a lunar eclipse. But why don't we see those every month? Because we can see that happens really often with our new moon and our full moon. They're in that line. It doesn't happen every month because the moon's orbit around the Earth is just a little bit tilted differently compared to the Earth's orbit around the Sun. And so they don't quite align quite perfectly every single month. It only happens about 4 to 7 times a year that both of those orbits are tilted just right, that they block each other enough for an eclipse. And that is our phases in the moon cycle. We're going to start tracking this, you guys, after Thanksgiving, and I'm excited to work on it with you. Have fun.